Hey guys, this is What If Ben 10 was an Invincible Part 4 Season 1. Let's dive into it. So we start our story off with episode 4, and we start our story off, in the desert of Egypt. Something's going down, and we see some sort of Laura Croft type character, dude, is trying to open up a tomb. Now, that doesn't really go his way after the tomb is completely sealed shut and closed off by some disturbance that Mark happens, because Mark's flying a little too close to the desert, causing a sandstorm. We see Mark and Nolan are actually training or Omni-Man and Invincible my ass, bro. That's getting beat every single other episode. I mean, god damn, bro. But we see that Mark and Nolan are basically going on a little training montage, and their whole conversation about Mark being a hero and all this other stuff, it happens somewhere the same. Nothing changes, Nothing from the plot point, the OG timeline of the story changes, because Ben, for this point in the story, is actually on his way back to Earth after his whole off-world experience he had with the Plumbers Academy. He goes back to Earth and he lands around the same morning time as Mark and Nolan are training and are now at Mount Everest. With that happening, we get switched back to Debbie talking to the widow of Red Rush. Now, nothing in the story really changes too much besides us getting introduced to, Uncle Max. Basically, Uncle Max is Uncle Ben Max. I don't really care. But Uncle Max is Grandpa Max. Damn, Grandpa Max. I'm tripping, bro. I'm out of my Ben 10 lingo. We haven't got a season, an episode, nothing from any type of Ben 10 comics, anything. None of that, man. Ben 10's been off the face of the earth for at least 2 years now. I need some Ben 10 content. I need it bad.
Oh, hell no, man.
And Grandpa Max is actually a close relative, or not relative, close family friend to Red Rush. So Red Rush and Red Rush's widow, I think Gata, I don't know, she's Russian. Her character, her story, her person is inconsequential to my story. I don't give a no, I'm fine. But we see that Grandpa Max is helping her move out, because we see that Debbie's there. Actually, she's a realtor. She's there to sell the house for Glenda or Quashna. I don't care, man. I don't correct me in the comments. I don't care. I didn't catch up on her name because she's not an equivocal person. She's not an equivocal character. She's not a critical character in the story, man. She's not critical. She's not critical, man. I'm sorry. She's not. But we see that Debbie and Grandpa Max show some words, and they kind of foreshadow their conversation and their relationship between each other. Nothing romantic, but it's a little bit of a lower tier kind of stare off between them that will kind of foreshadow their children's fight. Now, all I gotta say is, when I get to season 3 of this What If, something will be going down between Ben and Mark, and it will be epic. But that's just foreshadowing right there. So we see that Mark and Ben are actually hanging out. Mark and Ben are hanging out after Ben lands back to Earth, and Mark is really happy that he's back on Earth. He asks him how was space, and how is a Plumbers Academy going? He says that it's going pretty well, going pretty good, and me training that new, dude, Alan, the half Power Knight kid, remember him? Yeah, he's doing pretty well. He just passed his final exam in the Plumber Academy, and now he is a rookie. So all I gotta say is he's done good. Now he's a rookie, but he's also putting a lot on his plate. Now that he actually is now a honorable mention or backup team member to the Guardians, or the new Guardians of the Globe. Mark's saying, hold on, wait. You're telling me the new kid, the guy we met a few weeks ago is now a part of the Guardians of the Globe. I'm pretty sure that's what I said. I'm pretty sure that's what I said, Mark. As they start to go back and forth and kind of just chuckle and have a little nice time. We see their, their communication. They're friends. They're best of friends. They know each other since they were kids. So their conversations is very fluent, very cohesive. So we get switched away from them and we get focused on Alan, actually. The half Power Knight kid, Alan Albert, the half Power Knight kid we saw in season, I think, episode or part 2 or part 3. But we see that Alan is actually kind of going through the motions, as Alan is training in the Plumber Academy as he gets a call from Cecil saying that the Guardians of the Globe are having their first meetup at, the base, as it's out in, I think, Antarctica. But Alan grabs a ship or a ride from one of the members in the Plumbers Academy, getting him there in time. We see that Alan says halfway on the road there, saying that he got this, and he starts to just propel himself through the air using his fire powers to get to the base. He meets up with the crew a little bit late after, Cecil gives him the whole tour and everything like that. As we see him introduce the rest of the team, since he is kind of a last member throw on to the Guardians of the Globe that Cecil wanted to pit in. Since Ben didn't join the Guardians of the Globe and he's his own hero, and Mark didn't want to join either, they need another heavy hitter on the team. They're supposed to be the best superhero team in the world, and they need somebody that could, pretty much fill in that gap of alien and human interaction. Since we had the Martian and a few others that weren't completely human, that could fill the gap between something political, maybe even had to hash out anything with an alien or something like a Power Knight, since Power Knights were kind of a big name in the alien situation, because Power Knights, I gotta say that Power Knights, their main ability is fire. They can go up, their children forms can go up to supernova, a little solar flare. So I don't know about you, but if you read the comics, I don't read the comics religiously. I'll just do a little bit of, I'll watch a little comic reviews. But one thing I do know, I went a little deep search into Viltrumite weaknesses, and one of those key weaknesses is if a Viltrumite was thrown into the core of the sun and just stayed there, they would die, point blank. So what happens when a creature that is literally a walking star, a walking sun? What happens then when it just goes completely supernova and just blast off in a group full of Viltrumites? I'm pretty sure a fully powered, fully grown Power Knight could drop someone like Nolan. I'm not gonna lie, because it seems pretty reasonable to me that a Power Knight could be a pretty good weakness against a Viltrumite. Now I'm going to continue on with the story. I'm not going to yap anymore. But after we see Alan get introduced to the rest of the group of the Guardians of the Globe, we see that Alan is kind of just chilling with the group. As Alan starts to talk around and basically pretty much have a little conversation with everybody, he walks up to Shrink Ray and starts to talk to her a little bit, asking her, "So, you're a new hero, right?" She says, "I'm not a new hero. I've kind of been at this since I was a kid." As he says, "Okay. Well, I wanted to ask you something. Is Rex Blood a good guy?" Because he's always been my hero, Loki. He's been my favorite hero since I was a kid. And Loki, as she says, "What do you mean? Since you were a kid? How old are you?" He says, "Probably around his age." I'm just capping with you. I'm pulling your leg. But yeah, so they start talking and chatting it up a little bit. As pretty much, I won't do much with this conversation. They're just gonna be friends because we already see, if spoilers for season 3, we already see kind of a lower class romance bubbling between Shrink Ray and Rex. Now we see that Alan actually says he has to lead the group for a little bit as he's going off to do something real quick, but he'll be in touch if anybody needs them. His number was given to robot. So he goes off to do a little plumber academy training for later on. So we can switch back to Ben. Now, with us getting jumped in between the episodes, as most of the episodes doesn't change too much, and we did get that extra scene with Alan being introduced to the Guardians of the Globe, we do get shown, well, of the eventual talk between Alan, not Alan, but between Nolan, Debbie, and Cecil talking about how, well, the space or NASA is making their first trip to Mars, and, well, the government wants a superhero or a soup to oversee the landing. So, the astronauts don't get murdered there, or anything goes wrong, someone can save them and, well, keep it under wraps. So they first ask Omni-Man or Nolan, but with the whole situation about Nolan being the last survivor and them not really wanting to put him at risk, or the last survivor of the Guardians of the Globe, or not, and they don't want to put him at risk, they, well, send Mark and Ben up there. Mark and Ben go up there and team up to go and just supervise the whole mission, and they go on their merry way. Before they go, we see that, well, Ben says his goodbyes and says, and tells Kevin to keep an eye on Alan and make sure he doesn't get in any trouble or die. He walks over to Alan's place, or actually not Alan's place. He walks over to Alan's dorm room in Plummer Academy down in Washington, and just tells him to stay safe and not to get, not to die. So he walks off and tells Alan to stay safe. He walks over to, well, Gwen's place and says goodbye to her. He's gonna be gone for a week or two, and yeah, so he walks off. He also says goodbye to Grandpa Max and says that he'll be in touch. And Grandpa Max says that he should have a go out plan, so he gives him a beacon, basically a beacon, detonator that will teleport him back to Earth if anything goes bad, but only him. Because, well, if you don't know this, if Ben transforms or basically transforms, uses the Omnitrix in some sort of big clunky suit, most than likely when he turns back, that suit will be gone or ripped apart. And everything like from a jacket to jeans would be okay on his body, but anything like a giant, space suit that isn't really a part of his clothing will be lost. So we see that, well, Ben and Mark get ready to go up there. They fly off, and the fun begins. The fun begins, guys. Now what happens is, well, we get switched to actually a little conversation between, well, Mark and Eve. Eve tells him, and they have a little conversation about Eve's whole situation that she's going through. And the whole conversation goes the same, but put it simple, dumb it down. She says that if you're going to reveal your secret identity to, well, Amber, you got to be serious about her. Are you serious about Amber? As Mark is kind of conflicted, but at the end of the day, he still has something up his sleeve. And maybe he is, but he doesn't want to make, he's not very sure. And I kind of get that. I'm very decisive, low-key. I'm very decisive when it comes to relationships. I'm not gonna lie. I turn everything into a joke so nothing becomes serious. I'm joking, guys. No, don't be decisive. Just go with your heart. Follow your heart. Your heart won't get you in any problems unless you have a bad heart. But let's dive into it. What happened is he tells Amber a bald-faced lie, saying he's gonna be off for a school trip or something along those lines, and he blasts off, following the crew. And we see that Ben is actually on the ship off rip in, well, Ghost Freak form. Ben transforms back, and he only has a few turns before the suit is destroyed or his space suit is destroyed. Ben is in a modified version of the Plumber's Academy space suit that allows him to breathe in space and survive in there. So the space suit basically allows him to survive and also pumps in artificial air that gives him nutrition through his pores. So it keeps him alive, basically, since he's going to be gone for like a week up into like the sky without food. So he's going to need some sort of food, right? So What happened is Nolan and Debbie see the ship blast off, and they watch from afar. Now Mark's family is kind of having a little conversation. They're having a little argument, but at the end of the day, we see that Nolan seems to be very worried about Mark, and he doesn't want to lose him or have him die out there, and all this other stuff, right? So we get switched back to Mark and actually Ben talking. They have comms in their suits so they can talk to each other, especially designed by Cecil's men because Cecil wanted to make sure they actually can talk to each other than just them standing there next to each other for like hours to hours to hours without any conversation. So what happens? They would have been talking and chilling and them just having their nice little like, teenage angsty talk. Talking about relationships, and Mark actually would have asked Ben about secret identities. Ben says, well, my secret identity constantly changes since I turn into a bunch of aliens. The public kind of catched on when they started to see the same logo on the same alien time and time again. I think one time people thought it was a group of aliens that were saving the day, and then eventually people said it was too many people to be a group, so it had to be a team. And then they said too many, too many, so it basically just became. I basically turned multiple times in one on live television, and then they also just chalked it up to me being one person, and bada bing bada boom, here we are. I don't really think anybody really knows my identity, Mark, but I do know my family does, and that's what counts. Now, with relationships, with families, it's different. With a girlfriend, it's different because you gotta make sure you're serious about this girl. Are you prepared to be with her long term? To even marry her one day? Because that's the situation you're going down. If they know who you are, they're in danger. If you get enemies one day that will go after your loved ones, you gotta make sure that she's going to be with you through that, and she's going to carry that burden of keeping your secret. So are you sure you want to tell her that? Because I don't know about you, but I've told people my identity, my secret identity, before. It never works out well. At least in the past. But with who I found lately, I think it might be a different change, and I might actually tell her. Mark kind of gets happy saying, so what about this other girl? Mark says, and Mark continues saying, what about this other girl? Ben hits him with a rebuttal saying, what about the other girl? Get out of my face. You nosy as hell, ain't you, Mark? They start laughing and just giggling. So we're gonna learn more about who is Ben talking to. It's a character from the Benson universe, but we're gonna learn more about who Ben's talking to later on. But what happened is we get switched back to Earth as we see how actually Nolan and Debbie are having a little fancy date, and they also have a little rebuttal, and Nolan being very defensive, saying that, do you trust me, Debbie? As we see their conversation, we see the foreshadowing of what's about to go down in the end of the season of it. So after this astronauts land, we see that Mark grabs Ben and they fly off to an area to watch from afar. Ben only has a few turns left, around 3 maximum, before his suit rips apart and he won't be able to breathe in the vacuum of space if he times out or if he turns back into human form. He still has that, last resort teleport back to Earth button on his person, so that's where he's going to use if anything goes south. Anything goes south to a point where he can't, turn back into his human form without dying, type of stuff like that. So after the astronauts land and they make their cultivations on Mars, we see that, well, Mark and Ben kind of just pass out as Ben wakes up, telling Mark to wake up as well, kicking him in the shoulder as Mark's confused and what's going on. As they both look over and see that the group is gone. They go to investigate and all they see is track marks and footsteps. And they're kind of confused on what the heck's going on. After what they would have seen, they would have gone down a dark area, seeing a trap door in the ground, as Ben would have opened it up, but being helped by Mark's strength, saying that he doesn't want Ben to transform since he only has 3 goes to do, and they don't even know what situation they're in. So they gotta make sure he's using them well correctly. So they go down the dark, desolate, wasteland of a hallway. It having diamonds and all sorts of relics and materials in it, kind of like a cave area, a cave walkthrough, really. As they see slimy type of sectoid-like aliens crawling around them. Now, with this happening, the whole like Earth situation, everything going down on Earth. What's going on in Earth is actually very complex because we see that we kind of see um Dark Blood having some sort of investigation on Alan, thinking he's the one that killed the Guardians of the Globe. He did. So we see that he kind of gets conflicted and actually gets pressed on by Cecil. Cecil saying it wasn't him, blah blah blah. Cecil being a dumbass and not really understanding that Darkwing or Dark Blood, whatever his name is right. He can't be more than right. So after we see the sectoids, and we see that they almost get jumped by the sectoids as Ben turns into Upgrade and slimes past the sectoids. Now, since Upgrade is similar to Martians with his ability to morph and mold his body, we see that Upgrade and Mark kind of get pretty much cornered and told to meet their king. Mark and Upgrade look at each other, and Upgrade tells Mark to just relax. Mark and Ben go into the ship, and Ben's still in Upgrade form, by the way, or goes into the throne room of the king, or the emperor. He tells him the backstory of the sectoids and about how if the humans ever got attacked by the sectoids or a sectoid ever latched onto a human, it could be the end of their species and the end of your planet as well, and the galaxy. It's a hive mind, a virus. As they are kind of confused, but they start to talk and talk, and they are told that these things are demons. They're monsters. As Mark says, oh, okay, but what does that have to do with the astronauts? He says they cannot leave. They can risk jeopardizing everything. So Mark says, well, I understand. As Ben says, no, we don't. So Ben starts blasting off lasers, and the group runs for it. They start booking it as Ben is making a distraction, shooting lasers off, and eventually make their way outside, heading straight towards the spaceship or the spacecraft. They're running, as Ben has an idea. So Ben tells Mark to fly as hard as he can down to the ground to make a sandstorm. As Ben basically smiles through Upgrade form, basically his oval-shaped head, basically making a smile-like emoji type of expression, as Mark flies down to the ground, flying as fast as possible, as Ben actually morphs to a Range Rover or some sort of portable device the astronauts use to drive around, and starts to basically modify it so it drives faster. Eventually they get to the spacecraft sorry for this voice crack, eventually they get to the spacecraft as the astronauts start to make their way inside. Ben has his final light bulb as he morphs to the spaceship, giving it enough juice and enough upgrades to straight up just blast off the ground and start to go light speed towards Earth. During this time, the trip is cut down to like a day or two because of the light speed or the upgrades Ben is giving to the ship, because he can't do it too much as the ship isn't that advanced, and if he does push it to its limits, it could possibly blow up, or either the G-force could kill everybody inside. So he just goes a little bit of a faster level of speed, getting back to Earth within a day. So what happens after that? We see that Ben also follows, Ben sees Mark follows shortly after them, grabbing onto the ship before they go. So yeah, so that happens, and they make their way back to Earth. Now, we switch away from that plot point. Before we switch away, we see a little bit of an Easter egg. Somebody that's on the ship isn't who they are. Spoilers for season 2. But we can switch back to Earth, actually on Alan's story. Alan is training in Plumber Academy as he's basically came up against, or basically he's talked to by Kevin. Kevin asks him that if he's free this week because, he actually has a mission for him. Something's going down in, Japan, and they need well, most of the plumbers and some of the guardians to try to figure out what's going down. Now it is a Benton villain threat down in Japan that needs the attention of Kevin 11, Alan, and a few other guardian members. So you can decide which guardian member should come along and should tag along, because the plumbers and the government are trying to make grounds so they could work together for the alien threats and other things that are happening in this world. So yeah, so I'm gonna leave out here, guys. So season or part 5 will be a split between the original, changed timeline with Ben being, you know, basically accompanied with Mark, but also be a split story with Alan, Kevin 11, and a few other Plumber members and Guardians of the Globe members fighting some sort of unknown Benton threat in Japan. You guys can decide which threat that should be in Japan. But I'm gonna leave it off here, guys. So if you're gonna enjoy the video, please like and subscribe. As always, guys, have a blessed day. Deuces.